Thank you so much for being here. Whether you are here in our Zoom or on the live stream or listening by podcast or YouTube, we're thrilled that you could be joining us today for this fascinating topic, Mind Your Own Business, Balancing Communal Responsibility and Personal Autonomy. And we're learning from a great educator, Rabbi Avi Tilonsky, whose work at JDC fulfills his lifelong aspiration of amplifying Jewish involvement globally and contributing to the well-being of Jews worldwide. As a donor relations officer, Rabbi Avi facilitates connections between North American donors and JDC's global initiatives, engaging with diverse programs spanning continents. Before relocating to Israel in 2014, Rabbi Avi spearheaded the Kohelet Fellowships, introducing Jewish learning to over 1,000 parents across America, and served as a rabbi in New Jersey and Connecticut. With rabbinic ordination from Yeshiva University and a master's in public administration from CUNY Baruch, I always forget how to pronounce it, Baruch or?
Baruch.
Baruch, right. From CUNY Baruch, Rabbi Avi brings a wealth of expertise to his endeavors. Residing in Yerushalayim, the holy city of Jerusalem, he finds joy in exploring the city's neighborhoods, performing weddings, biking, and embarking on adventures near and far. I have a lot in common with Rabbi Avi, but certainly that last list. The joy of walking through Jerusalem, if you've never done it before, you could do it endlessly. Performing weddings is one of the great merits of being a rabbi. Biking is also one of my passions, and other types of adventures. So it is great to now be together. Mind your own business, balancing communal responsibility and personal autonomy. Rabbi Avi, thank you so much for being here with us.
So thank you so much for that kind introduction. And truthfully, it's nice to be sitting here in this room together with you, Rav Shmuley. I know that we share a friendship that goes back many years, and it's nice to share this screen at this time. And Eddie, thank you for all your work putting this together. It's great to be here with all of you. And you'll probably see that here in Jerusalem at the moment, it's just a little bit after 7 p.m. So you'll get to see the sun setting behind us as evening approaches. But to those of you who are taking time off in the middle of your day from your lunch break, thank you so much for joining us. Tonight, I hope that we can explore together something that I've been thinking about for a while. It's an idea that's been percolating with me. And I want to give two caveats to this. Number one, there are some sources that we're going to explore today, which may at first strike us as being something that we disagree with. And I think that's okay. We're exploring a topic that is not universally viewed in the same way within Jewish sources. And I want to kind of present some different views on it, and hopefully we'll walk away with some with a perspective that's our own at the end. So I just want to tell you, don't walk out in the middle. Stick around till the end. And additionally, I think that it's important just to understand that we're just touching the tip of the iceberg. There are a lot of sources and a lot of content in Jewish tradition that could connect to this. I'm going to allude a little bit to some things that we won't cover, but I'll just mention them so that you know where else to look if you're interested in exploring more. But this is really just the tip of the iceberg. So with that introduction, I'll explain to you what exactly I mean by minding our own business. And it's something that when you move from America to Israel, really strikes you at first. You know, there are a whole list of things that are foreign to American Olim, that are foreign to people who grew up in one culture and then come to live here in Israel. And one of them is that Israelis don't have the same boundaries that Americans would have. There's a story that there was an American who was visiting Israel. They're walking down the street and they were pushing their baby in the baby carriage, and one person walks up to them and says, "The baby's cold, put a blanket on the baby." And then another person walks up and says, "Your baby looks hungry, give them the bottle already." And another person walks up and says, "They're crying, give them a pacifier." And everybody's telling them what to do. And the person just looks around and says, "Why does everyone leave me alone?" And the person standing next to them says, "Well, it's because they care for you." And in Israeli society, people exhibit caring by getting involved, by, some would call it meddling, by telling you what to do sometimes. And in American society, that's a little bit frowned upon. It's considered to be invasive. So it made me wonder, well, is this a good thing? And I don't mean it in terms of put a blanket on your baby, but I mean it in terms of religion, in terms of uh, things that we think are right or wrong or could be done better. Is it good if we try to tell other people, maybe you could do this mitzvah, this good deed, or you could do that mitzvah? Um, are we supposed to try to educate other people, or should we say, I live my lifestyle and they live their lifestyle? Is it good for us to mind our own business, or should we try to get involved in other people's way of living? I just saw this last week. We were visiting my in-laws, and in the shul in their neighborhood, there is a small crowd that goes to mincha, to the afternoon service, and then there's a Sudah Shlishit, and then they have Mariv. And I always like to daven mincha, the afternoon service, together in this smaller synagogue, and then move over to my father-in-law's synagogue, which is larger but in a different location, just because they start a little bit later there, and then I join him afterwards. But I never stick around for the Sudah Shlishi, that third Shabbat meal. And there is one person in that shul, in that synagogue, who I think he's the one who sets up the Sudah Shlishit, but he's very, very excited about it. And every time that I'm there, he makes an announcement. He says, everyone is invited. Please stay with us for Sudah Shlishit. Please stay for the third meal. And 90% of the people walk out and don't stay. And this week, I guess he's feeling that people aren't listening to him, and he decided to get a little bit more aggressive about it. So this time he actually stood in front of the exit, crossed his arms, and he said, it's a big mitzvah to eat Sudah Shlishi, to eat the third meal. Making brachot is a big mitzvah, and we all want to answer amen. You should all stay. It's a big mitzvah. You'd be doing a good deed. So stick around and stay here for Sudah Shlishi, and I'm not moving out of the way. And so everybody either had to sit down and join him or walk around and escape somehow. I managed to slip out on the side, but it really made me feel, wow, this guy thinks that the right thing to do is to stay and eat the third meal together, to eat the Sudah Shlishit together with the people in this shul. And he's trying to encourage other people to do that. If it were me, I think I would set the table and I would probably say, everyone's invited to join me. And that would be it. I would leave people alone a little bit more. But it made me wonder, if he really thinks this is the right thing to do, maybe I should do what he's doing. Maybe I should stand in front of the door. Maybe I should try to sell it to people and explain to them how answering amen to the bracha is a good thing to do. Should I be more pushy to other people? And this made me think, wow, this really ties into this discussion that we're going to have tonight. So I'm going to share my screen so you can see some of the sources that we're going to explore. And that's really the question. Should we be a little bit more involved in those around us, or should we decide what's good for us and live our lives? I'm just going to share the screen. Hopefully you will all be able to see. Okay, so hopefully you can all see the screen. And I threw a quote on the bottom, which I found on the internet, which I thought was actually excellent. And it says, if you mind your own business, you'll be too busy to be bothered by anyone else's. And that's a good thought to keep in mind as we enter this conversation, that sometimes it can be a little too much. But let's see if there's a line. Let's see if in general it's a good thing to do. Let's see if it's not. Hopefully we'll see some sources maybe which will be a little bit surprising to us. And then afterwards, we can have a little bit of a conversation, and everyone can ask some questions. So, moving on, the first case that I want to examine, I want to start us off by looking at a few situations in Tanakh, actually, where people either do get involved in other people's lives or don't get involved in people's lives. Afterwards, hopefully, we can move on to one or two situations in halacha, in Jewish law, that actually deal with this. And we can walk away maybe with a few principles that can help us to think about how we do this. So the first case that I want to explore is Avraham and Noah, right? They didn't live at the same time, but if we start by exploring in Parshat Noach, Noach begins by saying, Eile toldot Noach, Noach ish tzadik, tamim haya bedorotav, et Elohim italech Noach. These are the generations of Noach. Noach was a righteous person in his generation, and he walked with God. And Rashi and some other commentaries pick up on the fact that it says that Noach was a righteous person in his generation. And if you look just beneath there, the second source there on this page, Rashi says, Yesh mirabotenu dorshim oto l'shevach. There are those from our rabbis who understand this as being a form of praise. He was righteous in his generation. Even in his generation, he was righteous. Kol shekain sheilu haya bedor tzadikim hayat tzadik yoter. That even if he was righteous in his generation, where all the people were pretty bad, then certainly he would have been righteous in another generation. Imagine if he had been in a mediocre generation or a very good generation, he would have been even better. So there are those who, from our teachers, who understand it to be a great praise of Noach. And there are those who understand it to be a criticism. Lefi doro hayat tzadik. In his generation, he was good. V'ilo haya bedoro shel Avraham, lo haya nechshav leklum. But had he been in Avraham's generation, where there was a great tzaddik like Avraham, a great righteous person like Avraham, then Noach wouldn't have been so special. So there are two ways of looking at this, right? There are two perspectives on Noach. And I heard that the Lubavitcher Rebbe said something very interesting about this. He said that if you look at the way that Rashi phrases it, he says that Yesh mi rabotenu, there are those of our teachers, our rabbis, that view this as a praise. And then when he describes the people who look at it negatively, he says, V'yesh dorshim, and there are those that look at it negatively. So meaning if you're a great teacher, if you're a rabbi, then you're going to look at this positively. You're going to view people positively. But if you look at it negatively, you're just one of the people. Yesh dorshim, you're one of those people who view it that way. So he says that the real goal ultimately is to look at people positively. But that's a side note. Anyhow, so we start off here by saying that there are two ways of looking at Noach. Either that he was a great person despite his generation, or that he was a great person because relative to the other people, he was pretty good. And if we look at one of the commentaries, Kedushat Levi, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berdishev, he's a Hasidic commentary, and he was known to be the great defender of the Jewish people. There's a story that's told that one time he was walking along the street on Shabbat, and he saw a Jewish person smoking a cigarette, and he walked up to them and he said, excuse me, sir, but do you know that this is Shabbat today? And he says, yes, of course I know that it's Shabbat. He says, and do you know that you're not supposed to smoke on Shabbat? Lighting a cigarette is one of the forbidden types of work. And he said, of course I know that. And Rabbi Levi Yitzchak just looked up at the skies and he said, God, look how amazing your people are. They cannot lie. They tell the truth no matter what. And so Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev was known to always view the Jewish people very positively. There are a lot of stories like that. That's not the only one. And so he comments on this this description of Noach, and he says, as you can see here on this page, Ela toldot Noach. These were the generations of Noach. Nira dehina yesh shnei minei tzadikim she'ovdim et haborei. It seems that there are two types of righteous people that serve God. Tzadik echad yesh she'oved haborei baruch hu b'itlahavut gadol. There's one type of tzaddik that serves God very well himself with great excitement, but he doesn't bring other people closer to serving God. He sits in his room studying, he serves God the best way that he can, but he doesn't impact on those around him. And there's a different type of tzaddik, a different type of righteous person who impacts those around him or her, who causes other people to live a better life. Kimo Avraham Avinu, and that was like Avraham Avinu, Shahaya Megayer Gerim, who was known to convert other people, meaning he taught them to believe the way that Avraham believed. He taught them about God. And so that was more like Avraham's model. So Noach was the model of the tzaddik who saves himself, most literally, who focuses on his own spiritual development. And Avraham was the type of tzaddik who impacts those around him, who tries to change the world. And he did, in fact. Vita b'kitvei ha'ari, and it says in the writings of the Arizal and the Kabbalistic works, she'al ze ne'anash Noach, al shelo haya mochiach harishayim shebedoro. And this, he says, was Noach was punished for this, that he didn't impact those in his generation. V'hutzrach legilgul b'Moshe, and he actually was reincarnated in Moshe. This is a very Kabbalistic teaching. But the point that I wanted to bring across here was that Noach was criticized for not having saved those around him. So when Rashi compares Noach to Abraham's generation, he's alluding to something bigger. He's not just saying, had Noach lived in Abraham's generation, he wouldn't have been so great because Abraham would have outshined him, but rather that his form of Avodat Hashem, his form of serving God, was not as great as Avram's form of serving God. In Noach's generation, Noach was advancing a personal righteousness, and Avraham was advancing a totally different model, where you impact those around you. And in the thinking of the Kedushat Levi, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev, it's so much better when you don't only live for yourself, but you impact those around you, you improve their spiritual lives as well, and you don't just escape on the Teva, on the ark, to your own safety, but rather you change the world, you convert others to your beliefs and to doing the right thing. So if we had to put the Kedushat Levi on one side of the coin, whether you should mind your own business or not, he's very clearly taking a stand to say, it's okay if you mind your own business and you live a good life, but it's not ideal. It's so much better if you can change those around you. Now, he doesn't say how you should do that, but he says Avraham should be our model more than Noach. And so if we compare the two, we should aim to be more like Avraham. And the next source, I'm not going to read inside just because I want to get to some of the things later on, but it talks about how if you teach your friends' children, meaning you teach other people, they become like your children. So the relationship that's created is a very deep one. And anyhow, let's look at the next case. Case number 2. We're sticking with Avraham, but I want to talk about Avraham and Lot. So Lot was Avraham's nephew, and the two of them went through a lot together, no pun intended, but Avraham saved Lot from Sodom, and at one point they were going together, and you can see in Bereshit Yud Gimel, Vayhi riv ben roe miknei Avraham uven roe miknei Lot ve'akanani ve'aprizi az yashav ba'aretz. And there was a dispute between the shepherds of Avraham and the shepherds of Lot. They had this dispute. And what were they disputing? So Rashi explains, Vayhi riv lifi shahayu ro'in ro'av shalot rishaim, because the Lot's shepherds were not so good, they were rishaim, umarim behemtam bestot acherim, and they would take their sheep to graze in other people's yards. V'roei Avraham mochichim otam ala gezel, and the shepherds of Avraham, who were a bit more moral, they would rebuke the shepherds of Lot and say to them, you shouldn't do that. Don't go grazing in other people's fields. Stick to your own fields. Vehem omrim nitna haaretz la'Avraham velo ein yoresh. And so the shepherds of Lot would respond back to them, and they would say, yes, don't worry. I know the fields don't actually belong to our family, to us at the moment, but the whole land of Israel was promised to Avraham, and he doesn't have a specific person who's going to inherit him at the moment. The Lot Yorsho, and eventually Lot is going to inherit Avraham, ve'ein ze gezel, and therefore it's not stealing. We can go already into people's backyards, and our sheep can graze there and get food. Ve'akatuv omer ve'aknani ve'aprizi az yoshev ba'aretz ve'lo zacha ba Avraham adayin. And Rashi points out, but still there were other nations in the land at the time. It didn't belong to Avraham yet. And so this was what this dispute was about. The shepherds of Lot said, it doesn't matter, that's not ours now, it's going to be ours in the future, so we can go and graze there. And Avram's shepherds, presumably based on the instruction or inspiration of Avraham, said, but it's not ours now. We can't go in there and just take other people's land and eat up their grass. That's not appropriate. Just a side note, these are not actually the sheep of Avraham or Lot. They're more recent sheep. But so anyhow, Avraham, Lot, their shepherds are having this great big argument. And what happens? So what happens is that a few psukim later, Avram says to Lot, Halo kol haaretz lefanecha, hi pared na me alai. The whole land is between us. There's a lot of space here. Let's separate. You go your way. Im hasmol ve'emina v'im hayamin ve'asmeila. So if you go left, I'll go right. And if you go right, I'll go left. Basically, let's go our separate ways. We can't agree. I think I'm doing the right thing, and you think what you're doing is okay, but I think it's wrong. So therefore, we can't get along. Let's separate. Let's go on separate paths. And hi paredna me alai. Let's each be separate. So if you look at this pasuk and you think about what it's saying to us, it's Avram is not saying, stick with me and I'll convince you to do what I'm doing. I'll find some other land for our shepherds to graze together. He says, no, I'm going to live my life. I'll do what I think is right. You live your life. You do what you think is right. I'm going to think you're doing the wrong thing, but I'm not going to try to convince you. Hi paredna me alai. Let's go our own way and let's mind our own business. So if you look at what this pasuk is saying, the conclusion of the argument of the shepherds is more or less that you should just mind your own business, live your own life. Other people will do their thing, you'll do your thing, and that's okay. But if you look at what Rashi says, Rashi quotes a medrash, which complicates the situation. Because you think of Avram and Lot just traveling separate paths. But what Rashi says is, Im hasmol ve'emina, if you go left, I'll go right. Bechol asher teshev lo etrachek mimcha. Whichever way you go, I won't go very far. Ve'amod lecha lemagein ule'ezer. And I will stand for you to protect you and help you out. So the way that Rashi is reading the end of the pasuk, when he says, if you go left, I'll go right, and vice versa, is that Avram is saying to Lot, not that we should go totally on separate paths, but that, yes, we can't be together because we have different ideas of what is right and how to act, but I'm still going to stand next to you. So you'll go to the left and I'll be just a little to your right, or you'll go to the right and I'll be just a little to your left, but we'll be next to each other. And if you need my help, I'm there to help protect you. And we'll be there for one another. But maybe we can't figure out a way to agree on what we should do. But the bottom line is we're going to help each other nonetheless. So that's a very different model than what you might think just reading the pasuk. Because when you read the pasuk, it says, "Hi paredna me alai." You go your way, I'll go my way. Let's separate. We can't decide to do the right thing. I'm not going to convince you. You're not going to convince me. But when you read what Rashi says, then it sort of brings a caveat because it's saying, yes, maybe you need to mind your own business, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't care for the other person. It means you still need to maintain a society together, perhaps. It means you need to protect that person. They should protect you. There are a lot of conclusions you could come to from this that sort of make it mind your own business, but don't leave the other person alone. Don't ignore them. So that's a very different model. Okay, so let's get to a third case. This case shocked me a little bit. It's something that has always shocked me, and it's the case of Dinah. This is also in Tanakh, also in Bereshit, and Dinah was the daughter of Yaakov, and Yaakov had a brother, Esav. They didn't get along. They separated for a long time. We won't go through their whole childhood story, but at a certain point, Esav was approaching Yaakov. Yaakov had a whole family, and they were about to have perhaps a confrontation. They hadn't spoken for many years, and Yaakov didn't exactly know how Esav would react. He was a little bit scared. He took some precautions, and that's where we find ourselves here in Breshit Perek Lamed Gimel. Vayishlach Yaakov melachim lefanav el Esav achiv arza seir sidei Edom. And so Yaakov sent messengers or angels towards Esav, towards Edom, to see how he was doing, what was going on, because he knew that Esav was approaching. Vayitzav otam lemor, ko tomrun ladoni leEsav. And he said to these messengers, this is what you should say to Esav. Ko amar avdecha Yaakov. This is what your servant Yaakov said in Lavan Garti v'charanata. I stayed with Lavan, whatever. I'm coming. We're going to see each other. Vayili shor v'chamor tzon ve'eved v'shivcha. And I have servants and cattle and other animals. And I'm sending these messengers to try to find favor with you, Esav. So it's a nice message. I'm trying to create peace. Let's see if we can get along. Vayashuvo malachim el Yaakov lemor, and these messengers came back to Yaakov, and they said, "Bano el achicha el Esav, v'gam holech lekratcha v'arba meot ish imo." And the messenger said, "We have some bad news. Esav, we found him, and he's coming towards you with 400 tough people." So the message didn't work so well. Vayira Yaakov meod, and Yaakov was very afraid. Vayitzer lo vayachatz et ha'am asher ito, and he split the people who were with him because he was afraid. He was afraid. And he split his cattle into two groups, sort of like that way he diversified the risk. And if Esav would find one group, he wouldn't find the other. So Yaakov was taking a protective measure because he was afraid of what might happen when he meets Esav. We skip a few psukim later. Vayakam balayla hu. And Yaakov woke up at that night, Vayikach et shtei nashav, et shtei shivchotav, and he took his two wives and his two shvachot, the secondary wives, vet echad asar yeladav, and 11 of his children, Vayavor et ma'avar yabok, and he passed them over a river. Some people say it was towards Esav, some say away. Vayichem vayavurem et anachal vayaver et asher lo, and he put all his property on the other side. And Rashi explains, his 11 children? What do you mean 11 children? Vedina hechan haita. He had another one. He had Dina. And where was she? Why didn't he bring her across together with the other people? Why isn't she counted in this pasuk? Nitana beteva v'nal befanea. So Yaakov took Dina and he hid her in a box and he locked it up. Shelo yitain ba Esav einav, so that Esav wouldn't see her. Ulekach ne'enash Yaakov, and for this Yaakov was punished. Sheman'a me'achiv, because he prevented Esav from meeting Dina. Shema tachzirenu lemutav, because maybe Dina could have returned him to a good path. Meaning Yaakov was afraid that Esav would see Dina and say, "Wow, she seems great. I'd love to marry her," and Dina would maybe find interest in Esav or agree, or Yaakov would feel pressured to agree, however it worked back then. And he didn't want Dina to marry Esav. That didn't seem like a good shidduch. It didn't seem like a good match. He was afraid because he knew Esav was a pretty bad person. So he hid her in a box. And Rashi says that Yaakov was actually punished because he kept Dina from marrying Esav. Because why? Because she could have turned him around. She could have saved Esav from his bad path. Had Esav had a good influence like Dina, it might have brought him around to a good path. He could have ended up doing many mitzvot and being an entirely different person. So here, at least the way that Rashi presents it, we see a pretty severe, strong push towards you should be involved in other people's spiritual lives. They should try to improve the way that they live, to the extent that you even have to do it if there's a risk involved. Meaning, for Dina to marry a very bad person like Esav is pretty scary. It seems pretty bad. And maybe she wouldn't have succeeded at turning him around anyhow. But still, Yaakov should have taken that risk and pushed and exposed Dina to Esav, in the hope that she could have turned him around and put him on a good path. I found that pretty shocking because everybody wants their children to marry a good person. Everybody wants to have a nice family with good morals. And it seems not worth the risk. I'll tell you that this is a little more complicated and you should read more about it if you're interested. And don't only read this Rashi, because there are those who say, no, actually, Yaakov did the right thing, but another person would have done the right thing in Yaakov's position, but because Dinah was 100% sure that she could have saved Esav, it was a different situation. Be that as it may, this is pretty strongly saying you need to get involved in other people's lives. You need to try to get them on a good path. If you see somebody who's doing the wrong thing, you should try to save them, even to the extent that you endanger yourself or your family's own spiritual goals or perhaps happiness, because maybe Dinah wouldn't have been happy in that situation. Because it's so important to try to change the way that other people are acting when you think that they're doing the wrong thing. So this was pretty shocking to me. And all of this sort of raises the question, but why? Why is it so important to get involved in other people's lives? Why can't I just be happy living my life and they can be happy living their life and I'll live the best life that I can? And they'll choose how they want to live and whether I believe that they're doing the right thing or the wrong thing. And I'm not picking specific examples because there are many different areas and no one's perfect. But why does it matter? Why does it matter the way that other people live? I think that part of it is based on something that the Rambam, that Maimonides writes in Hilchot Tshuva, in the Laws of Repentance. This is something that many people study every year in the lead up to the high holidays. And I think that it's also kind of a fundamental belief for many people who are very active in doing outreach and who are involved in trying to get other people to keep more mitzvot or just to live the right sort of life. So if you look with me here at the words of the Rambam, he says, Kol echad ve'echad mibnei ha'adam yesh lo zechuyot ve'avonot. Every person has some merits and some sins. We all have some good things that we've done, some bad things that we've done. Mish zechuyotav yeterot al avonotav tzaddik. The person who has more good deeds than bad deeds is considered a tzaddik. Umish avonotav yeterot al zechuyotav rasha. And the person who has the opposite, where they have more bad deeds than good deeds, they're a rasha, a bad person. Mechatze lemechatze beinoni. A person who is 50-50 is in the middle ground. V'chein hamedina, and also if there's a nation that's 50% good and 50% bad, they're considered beinoni, or middle of the road. Im hayu zechuyot kol yoshvei merubot alvonotehem harei zot tzadeket. If they have more good deeds than bad deeds in the whole country, then it's a righteous country. V'im hayu avonotehem merubim harei zot risha'a. And the opposite. V'chein kol ha'olam kulo. And also the entire world. So if the world is at balance between good deeds and bad deeds that are being done all around the world. So you have billions of people and they're doing billions of actions. Every second, there are probably billions and billions of things being done, some of which are good, some of which are bad. And if the world is balanced, then we're balanced. And if there are more bad things that are being done or have been done in the past year or in all of time, then the world can be bad or good. And if we look at halacha bet, Adam shavonotav merubim azachuyotav miyadhu made pirisho. Person who has more bad deeds than good deeds immediately will die. The Rambam says, he later complicates it by saying that there are all sorts of things that wait a certain amount of time, or things that are considered bigger sins and smaller sins. So it's not this straightforward, but he sets it up. Let's say you could do this godly calculation and figure out exactly that this person has more bad than good, then he would immediately disappear from the world. V'chein medina she'avonotea merubin miyad hi overet, and also a country that has more bad deeds would immediately be destroyed. V'chein kol ha'olam kulo, and also the entire world. Im hayu avonoteim merubim mizchuyoteim, if the entire world has more sins than good deeds, miyad hein nishchatin, the world would be destroyed. Shneamar Vayar Hashem ki rabba ra'at ha'adam. Just like we have psukim that talk about how God saw the world was bad, and then there was a mabul, there was a great flood. And the Rambam a little bit later on in Hilchot Tshuva talks about how we're supposed to look at the world as being in the balance, and every action that we take can tip the world towards good or towards bad. And when you view the world in this way, when you view the world at this perilous balance, then you want to change the world for the better. And that means you also want to change other people for the better, because you want to tip the world towards greater good, which will ensure the world's existence, because the world could be slipping in a bad direction. Currently, we're balanced 50-50. That's how we're supposed to view it. And it spurs us to action to try to improve the world. That means ourselves, but we can't do it alone. If everybody in the world were doing bad, but we were doing 100% good, it wouldn't be enough to tip the balance. So therefore, we need to recruit other people towards a good path, and that way we're saving the world. And that means that it's quite a lofty task. It's very important. And I'll tell you that there are a lot of people who take this very seriously, view the fact that the world is in balance as being a personal charge to try to not only live the right way, but to actually change other people so that they also live the right way. And this sounds very serious. So let's see what else lies behind this, whether we mind our own business or get involved in the way that other people live spiritually. So there are a lot of mitzvot that could be connected to this, and I'm not going to explore all of them because that would take a long time, but I'll just mention a few so that you understand what people discuss when they think about this question. Number one, lifnei iver lo titein michshol. Don't put a stumbling block before the blind. And that's generally understood to mean that we shouldn't cause other people or enable other people to do the wrong thing. So in a certain way, we are supposed to create the conditions for other people to do the right thing. Number two, lo ta'amod al dam re'acha, right? There's this mitzvah not to stand idly by when other people are in danger. And many people expand that also to spiritual danger. If other people are acting in the wrong way, and we don't stop them, don't help them to stop, whatever it is, then we're standing idly by while they endanger themselves, because what would be good for them is for them to live a moral life. Number three, Hashavat Aveda. This is an interesting one. I saw once that somebody wrote about how we have a mitzvah to return lost objects, right? So if somebody lost their wallet and we find it on the street, we're supposed to open it up and find the person's name and their phone number, find them on Facebook and contact them and say, I found your wallet, and return it. But that's true of physical things like a wallet or other items. But could you imagine how much more important it is to return their spiritual lost legacy to them? If people are missing a meaningful life, they're missing the moral life, they're not living the right way, then shouldn't we return that to them also? I'm not talking about how that could be done, whether it should be done assertively, aggressively, passively. We'll talk about that in a moment, because I think that that's something that I've given some thought about. Number four is pikuach nefesh. Some people believe you're actually saving people's lives by helping them to live in the right way. And we're not defining at all. We won't define what the right way is. Number five, arvut. We have a certain mitzvah to be responsible for those around us. We live as a community. Sometimes that's expressed in terms of how we do mitzvot, and sometimes that's just in terms of our communal responsibility. So you could view it as our responsibility for others. And then number six is that there's a specific mitzvah of rebuke. And we're going to explore that just for a moment, not in order to find out what the halachot are and how we should act, but because I think that some of the limitations on rebuke actually teach us a few principles which could be valuable in terms of how we should be involved or not be involved in other people's lives. So if you'll join me over here, we'll explore this mitzvah just for a moment. The Torah tells us, you should rebuke your peer, your friend, and therefore not carry on his behalf, not carry for him a sin. So it seems like we're supposed to just go around, and you see somebody who is, I don't know, driving through a red light. You should signal to them to pull over, and then you tell them, you shouldn't drive through a red light. It's really not good to do that. No, please don't drive through red lights. But it's not always so simple to do that. The Gemara in Beitza says, Hanach lahem liYisrael mutav shiyushogigin va'al yumizidim, that in a case when people are doing something and they don't really know better, but you assume or assert, you can guess that they wouldn't listen to you if you told them to not do that thing, then it's better not to tell them. Meaning somebody doesn't know how bad it is to drive through the red light. So if you would stop them and tell them, they probably won't listen to you anyhow. But then they're going to know that it's very severe. So better they should do it without fully understanding the severity of their actions. And the Gemara in Yevamot, this is the third source on this page, says, Amar Rabbi Eli, Mishum Rabbi Eliezer, B'Shem Rabbi Shimon, Kishem shemitzvah al adam lomar davar hanishma, kach mitzvah al adam shelo lomar davar she'eno nishma. Just as it is a mitzvah to say something which will be heard or received, to the same extent, you should not say something which will not be received. So he says, it's also a strategic decision. If you think that the people will not listen to you, you not only you don't have an obligation to tell them, but you actually have a mitzvah not to tell them. And then the fourth source on this page, which I'm not going to read inside because I want to get to the next source, just says that in our generation, people don't really know how to give or receive rebuke. So he says, don't think that this mitzvah is easy to do. Today, the Gemara says, people don't really know how to do this. So it's not straightforward that you can just go about rebuking people. And maybe that's an argument for, in many instances, to sort of mind your own business. Okay, you see something that you think is not the way people should behave, but maybe you should mind your own business. People aren't going to listen to you. That's what one limitation is. Or we don't know how to do rebuke well. We can't really transfer the message very well. But maybe there's some limitations here. And I want to take you into one case in halacha where this is applied. And that's a case in the Shulchan Aruch in Orach Chaim, where it talks about Yom Kippur. And the Shulchan Aruch says at the beginning of this page, Ochlin umafsikim kodem ben hashmashot shetzarech leosif ala kodesh. We start Yom Kippur, we stop eating a little bit early because you're supposed to add onto the holiness. So we add a little bit onto the day of Yom Kippur, and skipping down to the second paragraph, Nashim she'ochlot v'shotot ad she'chashecha v'hein einan yodot shemitzvah lahosif michol ala kodesh. And he says women who are eating and drinking until it gets dark, and they're not adding on to the holiness of the day of Yom Kippur, but this isn't necessarily women, it's anybody who doesn't realize that you should add on to this time. In mimachin bi'adam, we shouldn't protest. You don't have to make a big deal about this. You shouldn't say anything. So that they don't come to do it intentionally. Meaning, people are stressed out. Yom Kippur is coming. They're eating the final meal. They want to get in those last 10 bites before Yom Kippur. And you're going to come up to them and say, we're supposed to add 10 minutes onto Yom Kippur, so you should really stop. Don't finish your sandwich now. I know you might be a little hungry, but it's a big mitzvah to add on to Yom Kippur, so just stop eating. But everybody knows that people are stressed out. They're packing the food in. They want to finish the last bit. And so don't tell them anything because you don't want, they're not going to listen to you. And so you'd rather let them not add on to the day of Yom Kippur, but not have this issue of you telling them something and them not listening. And then the Ramah, the Haggah says, "V'hu adin b'chol davar isur." And this is the same in all isurim, all problematic behaviors. Amrina mutav shiyu shogigin v'lo yumizidim. We say better that they should be people doing it by accident and not doing it on purpose. So we see that there are some strategic limitations to getting involved in other people's lives. We're going to skip ahead because I want to leave some time for questions. So I think that there are a few questions that come out of this, out of these limitations that we saw in the Gemara, the case that we saw about Yom Kippur. Number one, before we get involved in the way someone else is acting, is there a chance that they will be interested in what I have to say? Do they already know what you're going to tell them? Maybe I don't need to tell them. They already know this. Is there a sakana to you or them? Meaning, the Mishnah Berurah commented on this halacha that he said that it could cause them to be very angry at you, and it could cause them to behave towards you in a way that's either dangerous or could cause conflict between you. So is there a danger, a sakana to either you or them? Is there a chilul Hashem in one way or the other? What's going to be the result of getting involved in someone's life? I sort of view this as a spectrum of behaviors, though, because it's not either, yes, I'm involved in their life, or no, I'm not involved in their life. There are a lot of ways to get involved in other people's lives. So you see on the left-hand side, you could, number one, say nothing. A little bit further, a little bit more extreme is to educate, to share in a nice way what you believe. A little bit more extreme is to rebuke them, to tell them that what they're doing is wrong. And then the last way is force, standing in front of the door saying no one can leave because they have to stay for Sudash Lishit. This just sort of struck me as like if you're in the office and your coworker comes up to you on a Friday morning and says, "What are you going to do tomorrow?" "I'm going fishing." And you could say, "Well, I'm going to celebrate Shabbat with my family. It's really a beautiful thing." But you say, "No, I don't want to meddle in their life, so I'll say nothing." You say, "I don't know what I'm going to do tomorrow." That's saying nothing. Educating maybe would be talking about what you're going to do. So you would say, well, I'm planning to spend time with my family. I'm going to pray in the synagogue. I'm going to eat a nice family meal. It's really beautiful. We really enjoy Shabbat. That's just talking about what you do, educating in a way about the beauty of Shabbat. And then there's rebuke, where you would say, "I'm going to keep Shabbat. You should also." And force would be to lock him in the office so that he can't go fishing. So that's what I'm saying by it's a spectrum, and based on the different considerations, we may choose different ways of behaving. Probably usually either more towards the left side, where we either say nothing or we educate in a nice way. That's my inclination. I do want to share the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He is probably one of the people that sparked a movement which changed the Jewish lives of the most people in the world. Over 4,000 emissaries, shlichim around the world, educating, creating Jewish community, but also maybe pushing people to change in a way that they didn't imagine. And he says, in one of his sichot, in one of his lectures, that the way that we should view people who are not living an active Jewish life is sort of like they're sleeping. He says that deep down inside, they really do want to keep the mitzvot or to do the right thing. So there's something that's about this which I think is nice. It refers to the Jewish spark deep down inside, and that's nice, because he says, you view people positively, you can love them for wanting to do the right thing even when they're not. But there's also something that's a little bit difficult about this, because people tell you the way that they want to live their life, and you sort of don't believe them. So that's a little bit hard. So I would say maybe I view the nice part about it, and I take that with me to realize that people, when you view somebody negatively, remember that they have a good part inside. But it's a little hard to put this into action and say people aren't living the way that they want. And I recently thought about a historical event that came with two quotes that sort of impacted the way I think about this. And that's in 1913, Rav Kook, who was the chief rabbi of Israel before Israel existed, he led a group of rabbis to visit a number of Jewish farming settlements in Israel that were specifically not religious. And he went to visit these places, and he made a big impact. If you look at some of the journals of the farmers who were living in these farming communities, they were very impressed that a group of rabbis came to visit them. And in a letter he wrote convincing some of the other rabbis to join this visit, this mission, he said, Ein lano etza acher. This is in the middle of this page. We have no other advice, no other option. Ki'im lahasir et shemot haba'alim alalu me'al machanotenu. We have no other choice but to remove labels, these names that we call each other from within our camp. Nitvadeh ish el achiv b'shem Yisrael haklali. We should just be known to one another as Jewish people or people. Lo b'shem miflakti u'machanati, not as people who are members of one camp or another. Nida sheyesh lanu b'chol machaneh harbe ma letaken v'harbe ma lekabel mehaor ve'atov ze mizeh. And we should know that everybody has some good and some bad, and we can learn from one another. And so that's what he said when trying to convince these rabbis to join him on this mission. And when he spoke to the farmers, there's a quote that he said, Lo banu lehashpia, banu liot mushpaim. We didn't come to influence you, farmers who are living a secular life, but we came to be influenced migodal mesirut hanefesh shalachem lebinyan haaretz, from the great sacrifice that you guys are making for building up the land of Israel. So Rav Kook said, instead of telling them we came to change you, but we came to learn from the good things that we see in you. And I think that this is a critical bottom line, that whenever we want to get involved in somebody else's spiritual life, we should first see the good that they have to offer us. And we should create a mutual learning opportunity, one from another, so that it's not just us coming to tell other people how to behave, but we can learn one from another. We can share our perspective and they can share their perspective, but we're coming to learn from the good things that we see in them. And the last quote, and with this we'll conclude and open things up for questions, is he said, when people were opposed to this mission, they said, how could you go and visit these people? How can you be exposed to them? On the very last line, mutav shiashimuni be'ahavat chinam me'asher b'sinat chinam. Rav Kook said, better that they accuse me of having unwarranted love than that they accuse me of having unwarranted hate. So I think that also should be a guiding principle towards us. In the end of the day, when in doubt, we should express love, try not to be critical of people. But once again, there's a broad spectrum in terms of how we impact other people. And there's a big difference between sharing our own experiences, maybe educating, and rebuking people. I think it's clear from many of the sources that we saw that we don't have to just say nothing. If somebody says to us, what are you doing tomorrow on Saturday? We don't have to say, I don't know. You can explain what you're doing. You can explain what's beautiful to you. You can explain what you believe in, and that's good. Maybe it'll have an impact. But there are a lot of considerations that we should take into account, practical and in terms of how people will feel when getting involved in those around us. So hopefully we can merit to improve the world little by little in a nice way and increase love one for the other. And with that, I open it up to questions.
Wow, thank you so much, Rabbi Avi. This was so good. Thank you, thank you. I appreciate all the sources that you shared. We're getting so many folks that are hitting the likes on our recording right now on Facebook and everything. Such a breath of fresh air. Thank you for that, friends. Now we can open it up to any questions that folks feel. You can either type in the chat or you can send us a direct message on our live. We got a message here, Rabbi Avi, from our folks from Facebook. How do you feel confronting people without bringing in shame?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't have a source for this one.
Followed up, sorry. And then it says, following up with the slide you showed about where things land, where does shame land between all of the things that you shared? Okay.
Yeah, it's a really great question. I think that shame is involved on two sides of the coin, really, because you don't want to cause shame to other people. In fact, it's an avera, or something we're not supposed to do, to embarrass other people. I think that that's a serious consideration, in terms of how you do this. Do you do it privately? Do you do it publicly? Should you not do it at all because the person may be too afraid to hear this from you? Sometimes you need to ask permission from the person. Are you open to hearing some feedback about something? Are you open to hearing a different perspective about how to do something? And maybe they'll tell you. Asking permission can help sometimes. And sometimes I think, just to share a tip, talking about my own experience and how I learned that particular thing, and maybe how I wasn't perfect in that area as well. And it was something that I learned and wasn't just born that way, can help also. Or if it's something I'm still struggling with, it's also okay to talk about that. I don't think that we need to be perfect. And I think that people learn from that too. Yeah, I still remember that one time there was somebody who wasn't coming to synagogue, and somebody asked me, could you talk to them and try to encourage them to come? And I was pretty nervous about it because I thought that how could I tell him to do something differently? But I thought I would take a different path. And I just asked him, would you be interested in coming more? Or are you comfortable the way things are? Is there something I could do to make you feel more comfortable coming? And so I put it on myself, sort of, to ask him, what could I do to help you? Because I knew he already came some of the time. And he actually confided in me something very interesting, which connects to shame, which was that he didn't know how to put on a talit. He didn't know how to put on a prayer shawl. And he said that's what was keeping him from coming more often, because he was embarrassed a little bit every time that he came. So we actually set up a time, and I helped to show him in private how to put it on and how to do it. And after that, he was more comfortable. He came more frequently, and that was the issue. But I think that sort of by putting it on myself, saying, is there anything that I can do to help, as opposed to telling him what to do, that helped to remove the shame from it. But it's a tough thing. I don't think you can get it 100% right. And it's something that we need to be very cognizant about. So I'm glad you asked it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Looks like in the chat we have a question here from some of our team group that is here. Would Darkei Shalom trump minding our own business?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that Darkei Shalom, in a broad sense, means that we act nicely towards others so that society is improved. Now, the question is, what does it mean to act nicely to others? I think that that really depends on a factual question of what they would want and how they would handle what you do or say to them. There are people who, you invite them for a Shabbat meal and they'll be overjoyed. They'll be so excited. They say, I've never been to one. I always wanted to be invited to one. Thank you so much. And you ask somebody else and they'll say, why are you telling me what to do? Why are you making me come to this thing? I don't want to come. I don't want anything to do with that. And it's the same question, maybe even asked in the same way. And in one case, you're making somebody's life much better and they're going to be very happy. In another case, you're offending someone. So I think that this idea of how do we improve society, how do we do nice things to others, is really relative and requires an assessment of how this person would handle the question or the suggestion.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Looks like we're just at time. So I appreciate you. Thank you so much to everybody who's joining us, who's listening to this recording, and to Rabbi Avi all the way from Israel, taking the evening to share such a beautiful class. We appreciate you, Rabbi. Thank you so much. Have a good night in Israel. Have a good day here in the US. Take care.
Thank you all, and a Shabbat
Bye-bye.
Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.